This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries, San Quentin Prison. Once you enter, it is unlikely you will leave. But convicted murderer Mark Adams fashioned an improbable escape. You may be able to help catch him. The story of a young housewife who vanished from her home in Gothenburg, Nebraska. Her husband wants her back, but he must answer allegations that he is the one responsible for her disappearance. Stephen Cox was a small-town hero. Handsome, popular, successful. Stephen Cox may also have been a con man who bilked over $3 million out of his unsuspecting neighbors. The people of Medford, Oregon want their money back. A young housewife who disappeared, a local hero turned bad, an escaped convict. 3 people whose fate remains a question mark. Perhaps tonight we'll find some answers. Also a special appeal from the police in Philadelphia, who will ask for your help in tracking down a murderer. Join me. You may be able to help solve the mystery. The town of Gothenburg is located in the heart of Nebraska's farm belt. There is a strong sense of community among its 3,000 inhabitants. And when a neighbor is in trouble, it becomes everybody's business. On December 11th, 1987, a housewife named Christy vanished. Her disappearance turned into a controversy that continues to this day. Christy married Mark Nichols when she was 19. Soon after their marriage, a daughter was born. And in April of 1986, a son. Those who knew Christy well felt her life centered around her family.
Christy was a very good student and nice-looking girl, and people liked her, but she always had kind of a negative self-image. And I think Christy never felt she did anything until she had her children, and there was something she could look at and say, hey, I did this pretty well. Nobody can do this any better, because she was just so proud of her children. She loved them. I would have never thought that Christy would run away. She would have never left her children. I would have never believed that.
Christy's husband, Mark Nichols, works at a local gas station. He was the last person to see her alive. There are rumors in Gothenburg that say he is responsible for her disappearance.
People in small towns, they talk a lot. And a lot of these rumors tend to get pretty vicious. There's been a couple rumors that I'd chopped her up and put her in garbage bags and buried her at the dump. That's one of the first ones I heard. And that one really got to me, because I guess they were actually up there digging around.
Mark Nichols claims he is innocent of all wrongdoing. He wants his wife to come home. But until Christy returns to Gothenburg, he remains under a cloud of suspicion. The police investigation of this case has raised some disturbing questions about the events surrounding his wife's disappearance. Since Christy vanished 11 months ago, no one, family members or friends, have had any contact with her. For this reason, the Nebraska State Patrol has been called in. Officer Terry Ahrens is in charge of the case.
And as the investigation has proceeded, it's starting to look more and more like a foul play situation. There's just a lot of things that aren't ringing true, that don't appear like your normal missing person situation.
Christy, let's
Police
just take
began
you
to
down
uncover
the
evidence
exam
that
room.
the Nichols marriage was in trouble.
Mark, could you just wait out here for a few
They learned
minutes?
that Christy had been seeing another man. 10 days before her disappearance, she had gone to a local hospital for treatment of an injury she received during a fight with Mark.
Gone over the x-rays, and it doesn't look like your thumb is broken. However, it's
The only
obviously
bad fight I
different.
can remember is when I was trying to get her to stay home from going out, and she was getting so upset at me, she started to try to hit and kick me, and that's when she burned the side of my neck with a cigarette she was holding. And I tossed her onto the waterbed, and she landed wrong and kind of twisted up her thumb underneath her.
What exactly happened to your finger tonight? I saw Christy on the Friday after Thanksgiving. She came to the emergency room complaining of a sore thumb. She was acting like a scared rabbit, if you will. She's never been one for great eye contact or been very verbal. She obviously wasn't telling me everything either. Mark was in the hallway nearby, and I couldn't, looking back, really tell if it was reassuring for her to have Mark there or not.
Christy also told her cousin, Debbie Fredrickson, that she had been abused by Mark.
When I went to see Christy, she was working at the bar, and she was having problems with her husband. She would tell me that her husband would beat her. When we left the bar, Christy showed me a bruise on her side, and it really scared me. I told her she needed to go get help from somebody, and I asked her how it had happened, and she said her and Mark had gotten an argument, and he had thrown her around, and she just acted like it wasn't a big deal. It was something that happened a lot.
As far as a violent argument, which there seemed to be a lot of rumors going around that I was always beating up on her, that's just totally wrong.
Oh, hi. You're Mrs.
On December
Nichols.
9th,
I'm
2
calling
days
for
before her
police. Have a seat.
disappearance, Christy went to an attorney to begin divorce proceedings.
What can I do for you, Christy?
Well, I need some help.
What's your problem?
I need someone to help me get through. the
Christy was
situation
frightened that
that's
Mark would
putting
find
me
out, and for this reason went to an out-of-town lawyer.
Well, just relax. We do a lot of divorce work. I've handled hundreds of divorces, but she had to rank up in the top 5 of being very distressed and upset and nervous and needed help. And when she explained certain abuses that she had been subjected to, we decided to make some telephone calls to call the authorities and to report certain crimes that had taken place. Christy,
Oh,
I feel that she was very sincere and honest in what she was telling me. I don't know what motive she would possibly have had to conjure up a story about being abused by her husband if it didn't in fact happen. I was convinced, and I am still convinced, that it happened.
What was Christy's state of mind when she left the lawyer's office? Was she preparing to run away, as Mark claims? Or was she planning on fighting for the custody of her children, as her mother believes?
I can say that the day that Christy was in my office on December 9th, she was not panic-stricken to the point that she would run or leave. And in fact, she had planned to come back. When she left, she had made an appointment to come back to my office.
The day after this meeting, December 10th, Christy and Mark went Christmas shopping with their children. This was the last afternoon she would spend with her family.
I felt real uncomfortable the day before she left because I felt a lot of anger coming from her.
That evening, the couple hired a babysitter and went to the local bar where Christy worked.
Or he won't go to sleep.
When I babysat the night that she disappeared, I was surprised that those two were going out, the both of them were going out, because I knew they weren't getting along.
When we were at the bar, things seemed to be going real well. I felt there was a good attitude about herself and myself, and a lot of laughing and carrying on.
Mark and Christy left the bar around midnight and drove to an all-night convenience store. At 12:30, they headed for home. According to the babysitter, Mark arrived home between 12:30 and 1 o'clock in the morning. The babysitter was doing her homework in front of the television and doesn't remember seeing Christy.
Tom Banks is an electrician and says for the time being.
I was about 5-6 yards behind her when she reached the door, and she walked right by the living room where the babysitter was at, back towards the kids' bedroom, and went into the main bathroom.
It seems strange because Mark had paid me with cash when Christy usually pays me with a check. It was unusual for Mark to pay me.
Is that enough?
Yeah, that's fine, thanks.
How was everything?
I really can't believe that I didn't see her because I would have heard footsteps and I would have heard her go into the bathroom because I was there, I mean, what, between 5 and 10 minutes so that I would have been able to hear Christy somehow. But I didn't hear or see Christy.
According to Mark, Christy went to bed immediately after the babysitter left. The last time he says he saw her was at 2 a.m. when he went to sleep beside her.
And that's the last thing I remember until my kids woke me up the next morning. And the first thing I noticed was she wasn't in the bed.
Mark claims he searched the house and noticed Christy had taken a suitcase full of belongings with her.
Christy?
But both family cars were still sitting in the front yard. At 9:30 in the morning, Mark received a phone call from Christy's mother, who lived 100 miles away. Even though he knew his wife was gone, Mark told her mother that Christy was still in bed, asleep.
I'll ever call you.
I didn't want to worry her at the time because I didn't know where she was, so I told her that she was still in bed sleeping because I didn't think she felt real good.
At 11:30 a.m., Mark took his children over to Christy's grandmother's and asked if she could take care of them, as he was planning to search for his wife.
You take the kids.
Well, I didn't think much about it at the time, but like I say later, he never asked me at all or telephoned me, to take care of the kids, where they always did before. That was really about the strangest thing.
Yes, can I help you?
He never asked if Christy was at my house or if I'd seen Christy. He just said that Christy was missing, and he acted like he was shook up.
I spent approximately 2 hours just riding around town trying to spot her, maybe coming out of a store, or I drove some residential streets where we knew some people.
When we checked out Mark's story about driving around looking for Christy, we could find nobody in the city of Gothenburg that had seen him driving around.
At 1:37 p.m., Mark filed a missing persons report with the Gothenburg Police Department.
What time did you see her last? I saw her last when I went to bed about 2 a.m. this morning.
I was real upset because there was no indication whatsoever that she would just pack up a suitcase and just leave.
During their investigation, the State Patrol discovered that Mark moved out of the house the day after his wife's disappearance. A few weeks later, he boxed up all of her clothes and sold both of their cars.
Well, looks like we got a spot on the plastic.
In March of 1988, 3 months after she disappeared, Christy's suitcase was discovered in a roadside rest area 30 miles west of Gothenburg. Police found it surprising that earlier, Mark had precisely detailed all of its contents.
It had appeared to everybody present that the suitcase had been placed there instead of just thrown out. The items were neatly laying around. It was like the person that put them there wanted them to be found. If my wife had left me, I wouldn't be able to look through the closet and tell you what she had taken. I probably would be able to tell you maybe what suitcase she had taken, but he was listing items of clothing right down the line and knew what she had taken.
The area surrounding Gothenburg has been searched extensively. No other trace of Christy Nichols has ever been found. Today, the case is stalled.
It is difficult, without locating Christy Nichols or her body, to determine what, if any, charges would be appropriate. We basically are concerned about the way she disappeared, the fact that she has not contacted her children, she hasn't contacted her family, she did not take one of the family vehicles, and basically the continued long absence all point to that perhaps foul play in some form is involved.
I'd have never done anything to hurt my wife. That's just the person I am. A lot of people think I'm a violent person. I'm not. I'm not a violent person.
I hope and pray that she was alive, but if she isn't, I'd still want to find a solution to this case. I'd like to have her buried someplace where we'd know where she was.
I want very much for Christy to come home. But if for some reason she doesn't want to come home, Christy, at least call somebody. Let us know where you are, whether you're all right.
By all accounts, Christy Nichols was trapped in a marriage gone wrong. Nobody can say for certain if this is what motivated her disappearance. All that we know is that Christy Nichols has vanished without a trace, and her family and friends would like to know why. In a moment, the story of a remarkable escape from San Quentin prison. Last October, we examined the mysterious disappearance of Gail Delano, a 35-year-old mother of two who vanished from her hometown of Wiscasset, Maine. After her second divorce, Gail Delano sought companionship by placing personal ads in a local newspaper. On June 21st, 1986, Gail drove to a restaurant in the nearby town of Brunswick. She had told her two teenage sons that she was meeting a man named John who had responded to one of her ads. Gail Delano's family never saw her again. 2 days later, police found her car abandoned in the restaurant's parking lot. Later that day, a restaurant worker found Gail's keys in the same spot where her car had been parked. 2 weeks later, Gail's purse was found. Though it seemed untouched, it contained no money. For 2.5 years, investigators and Gail's family were baffled. Update, Mobile, Alabama. The 2.5-year search for Gail Delano has come to an end. Tragically, she took her own life shortly after she disappeared. A forensic administrator in Mobile watched our program and recognized Gail's photo as a woman who had died in a local hotel room in 1986.
And when I saw the photograph, I immediately saw the resemblance between Mrs. Delano and an unidentified body that we had in our laboratory in Mobile.
After 2 weeks of forensic tests, positive identification was made. Police now theorize that Gail Delano orchestrated her own disappearance. They believe that after she drove to the restaurant, she hid her keys somewhere on the car, removed all the money from her purse, discarded it, and then flew to Alabama. That evening, she checked into a hotel in Mobile, where she registered under the name Jackie Stafford. 3 days later, police discovered her body. She had died from a drug overdose. On November 11th, Gail's family held a memorial service for her in Brunswick, Maine. Gail's family showed remarkable courage, as for 2 long years they searched for the truth. Her loss saddens us all, and to her parents and sons, we send our deepest sympathy. California's San Quentin prison is justly known as one of the country's most secure, maximum security prisons. Few cameras are permitted behind its walls. But recently, Unsolved Mysteries was allowed inside, so we might document one of the few times the system failed and help recapture an escaped prisoner. In the summer of 1986, an inmate named Mark Adams mysteriously vanished. The events leading up to his escape began on a summer night in August of 1979. On that evening, 3 high school students entered a municipal baseball park located in the quiet community of Modesto, California.
Hey, you know who's over at Mark's house?
Who?
Susie.
No
way.
They gathered in the dugout to drink some beers and to chat about school and their friends.
Mark, don't think that I'm sweet. Yeah.
Three figures appeared out of the darkness. Over the previous few weeks, there had been other robberies by these ski-masked individuals.
Give me your wallets.
In the earlier attempts, nobody had been injured.
Give me your wallets.
Why don't you guys just leave us alone?
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
One boy, Mike Ridenour, was dead. Another, wounded. An eyewitness description of an automobile spotted at the scene led to the arrest of 3 robbers. The trigger man, 16-year-old Mark Adams, was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 25 years to life. Located on San Francisco Bay, San Quentin is an impenetrable fortress. 21 armed posts surround the 3-foot-thick prison walls, lined with razor-sharp barbed wire. Today, over 3,000 hardened criminals call the prison home. Charles Manson is only one of its infamous residents. In its 136-year history, other criminals such as Ciaran Ciaran, Carol Chessman, and outlaw Black Bart have been locked away in the prison's massive cell blocks. A major portion of the San Quentin's current population are repeat offenders. It is the end of the line for the hardened criminal.
San Quentin Prison is different from other prisons because of its design. There are armed officers inside the institution. They're in gun walks and manned areas where there's weapons inside the institution. Mark Adams was here because of the physical plant and security that San Quentin can provide inmates like Mark Adams.
When Adams entered San Quentin, he was 19 years old. He would have been eligible for parole in the year 2007. He began his sentence under close scrutiny, but after 6 months, restrictions were relaxed. His privileges included a job working with computers as a clerk in the prison's academic department.
Mark Adams was essentially a model prisoner. He worked very well with people. He obeyed the rules. And he would seize any opportunity he could to stay out of his cell. When we had special projects where he'd have to work some overtime, he was only too happy to assist. I'm sure that Mark Adams took advantage of his position. He probably checked schedules, he probably checked timing. He wanted to leave no margin for error.
On June 10th, 1986, 4 years to the day after he was put behind bars, Adams secured an authorized pass allowing him to leave work early.
I'll see you later.
Where are you going?
Going to the dentist's office.
Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
At approximately 2:30 p.m., Adams left his job and walked to the security checkpoint, showing his pass. He was observed heading to the dentist's office. That was the last time anyone remembers seeing him. At 4:15 p.m., the inmates returned to the cells for the afternoon head count.
The 4:15 count, when there's no hitches, will take approximately 45 minutes to clear.
Inmate, let me see some skin.
If something is wrong with a count, if there's one person that cannot be accounted for, most often there's a simple explanation for that miscount. If you can't find any error then, you go cell by cell, bed by bed, with an officer and a picture of those people assigned to those cell blocks and that particular cell.
Win. Good. 2A11 ID. 2A12 negative.
No, showing Adams in here.
At approximately 4:45, Adams was confirmed missing. Immediately, San Quentin locked down. All access to the prison, inside and out, was sealed tight. Every prisoner was confined to his cell, their few privileges revoked.
We do down in the hole, that's where it is.
An intensive search by correctional officers was fruitless. No trace of Mark or the method of his escape was found. Authorities have three theories as to how he escaped. The first suggests that Adams put on civilian clothes and walked out with the regular visitors, passing through 3 different armed gates. In order to accomplish this, Adams would have had to show a photo ID at the first 2 gates. A second theory proposes that Adams simply went over the 25-foot prison wall.
When an inmate has to make that move from a blind spot over the wall, he has to go from an area of concealment to one of visibility. It can happen in a matter of seconds, but in those few moments that it took to hit the wall and scale it, the officer's looking in another direction, an escape is perpetrated.
The chances that Adams could have made the climb are extremely slim. Shortly after his escape, 3 inmates attempted to scale the wall. All 3 were immediately captured, and 1 was injured in a struggle with officers.
We considered also in our investigation of the possible ways of escape is, could he have gained access to a vehicle? It's possible that Mark Adams could have studied vehicles which do pass in front of his area of assignment.
Every day, approximately 225 service vehicles enter and exit the prison. Each must pass through a guarded inspection area for a thorough search. There is a remote chance Adams could have found a place to hide. And then when the search ended, he would have been driven straight to freedom.
If there were a mistake in the security system, Adams would have been the type to look for it. He would have been the type to find it. And he would have made plans to exploit it. And as a result, that's precisely what he did.
It's been 2 years since Mark Adams has escaped from San Quentin prison. And in those 2 years, we have not found any concluding or convincing evidence to tell us how Mark Adams escaped.
In a moment, you'll meet Eugene Richmond. He vanished after defrauding his friends and neighbors of $3.5 million. Came back to face the music. His alleged accomplice, Stephen Cox, is still at large. In 1981, Lorraine Rondo was 68 years old and newly widowed. Her husband had left her $100,000. It was all Lorraine had. She invested it with a man named Stephen Cox. In 1976, A drunk driver left Michelle Witt crippled for life. The insurance company awarded her $75,000. Michelle invested her money with the same man, Stephen Cox. On September the 24th, 1984, Stephen Cox disappeared. He has not been seen since.
Is there anyone in this room that has anything to offer in this case at this time? If so, please step forward.
At bankruptcy court in Medford, Oregon, a packed audience of more than 200 angry investors came forward.
And I'm one of the investors who invested with Steve Cox in excess of $100,000.
They told authorities that they had given Cox in excess of $3.5 million. Every penny was gone.
That can be done so that we can get our money back.
How did Stephen Cox get $3.5 million from the people of Medford? Well, Cox was a hometown boy. The people of Medford knew him and trusted him. They hope that if he's watching tonight, he'll return and deal with them honorably, face to face.
In high school, Stephen Cox was a popular student and an all-around athlete. He was captain of the football team, letterman on the basketball team, and named Oregon's all-state baseball team. He went to college in Oregon. Then after he graduated, married his college sweetheart, Deborah. They settled in Medford.
I didn't believe it. No.
In 1982, he started his own company, S.D. Cox Investments.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, let me get it. Hold on a second. Let me get it up on the screen here.
When he first began, all the indications we have are that his intentions were good. He had had some luck with commodities, with other investments, gold and silver and other things, and he really wanted to make money for other people. At the same time, he made money for himself.
Looking at it right now.
Stephen Cox attracted investors by offering a rate of return as high as 25%.
Good morning, Michelle.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Good to see you both.
There was only one catch. In exchange, they received nothing more than Cox's IOU in the form of a promissory note. Michelle Witt needed $1,200 a month to pay for her round-the-clock nursing care. Despite the lack of security, she decided Cox's high return was worth the risk.
And that 24% ballpark that we were talking about is something we're definitely going to be able to get for you.
The $75,000 was invested, and for 3.5 years, I got a monthly payment of $1,250. He seemed to know what he was doing, and I'm sure he did know what he was doing.
Hey, Gene, good to see you.
Cox's business doubled, then tripled. Eugene Richmond, an old friend, was brought in as a partner.
Well, it'll work. Good.
Well, you know, I'd known Steve since, we were in grade school together. I mean, he was always somebody I looked up to. You know, he was, the high school quarterback of the football team, and, just that typical guy that everybody wanted to know and be around.
You know, the way I look at it, mortgage paper.
Basically, whatever Steve Cox asked me to do, I did. And I just trusted him unequivocally.
Eugene Richmond was the forceful personality in the partnership.
It's a nice house you have here.
Oh, thank you.
Eugene Richmond was the one that went out and got people to invest their money.
Ms. Rondo, I'm sorry I have to bother you at a time like this.
When Eugene Richmond made his sales presentation to Lorraine Rondeau, she gave him all the money her husband had left her.
And I know that your husband has left you some money.
I'm confident that I told every investor that their money is at risk. I would have investors ask me, what happens if S.D. Cox goes belly up? And I would sit right in my chair and look them straight in the face, and I'd say, you're going to lose your money.
Well, Eugene Richmond is a liar then, because he never did. Never told us. Not me. Never told me that.
If she was not aware that her money was at risk, then either I failed in my job to tell her that, or, like a lot of people, they didn't want to hear it.
Eugene Richmond never told me that my money was unsafe in any way, that everything was secured, that they had money. If I wanted all that money right now, they had money laid aside that they could pay off any one of us.
Yeah, the cracks, definitely the cracks first.
By 1983, S.D. Cox Investments was flourishing. The firm bought a restaurant, a neighborhood bar, a video arcade, 2 jewelry stores, and an inventory of gems worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
When you have a situation where a local businessman looks successful and other people are going to the bank with the checks, they're making the deposits, that will get around. That facade works. People see the Porsche drive by and their heads turn. People see the Mercedes drive by and they think that guy's successful. They don't realize that maybe that guy is, is not making ends meet and he's 2 payments behind on the Porsche.
By 1984, many of Stephen Cox's investments began to go sour.
In my opinion, Steve was not a good businessman. In Steve's case, he made some wrong decisions.
Well, I'll talk to you tomorrow about that. That's a whole separate thing. Now, I don't want you...
You know, there's some real estate that wasn't panning out the way it was supposed to pan out, and you had to feed it. You had a restaurant he was feeding. And instead of just cutting it off, he wanted to hang on.
That's the important part.
You know, he was competitive. He didn't want to lose, ever.
$50,000. $50,000. You heard me the first time.
What happened is Steve Cox had some luck at the very beginning. He had some good fortune. He made some money. And as he continued to pay 22 or 25% interest, he had to get more and more people involved at the bottom in order to be able to do that. It's like a pyramid scheme. There's nothing to back up his promises to pay back this money. That's a house of cards. Eventually it has to fall.
Well, look, what do we need to do to turn this thing around?
You know what we need to do. We need to turn those numbers around. The way you're going to turn those numbers around is getting more clients.
All right, I see you've got my flowers.
Yes, I did, Eugene, and thank you so much.
As a last resort, Eugene went back to Lorraine Rondeau and asked for her last $5,000.
Do you have some savings to cover them with?
Well, I'd been in the hospital, and Eugene came over to the house to see how I was doing, and he said, "Do you have money enough?" And I said, "I have some in savings." So he suggested that I take the $5,000 and put in so that I would be getting some interest. So I wrote him a check for $5,000.
I couldn't even tell you right now whether she invested any money or not. I do not recall. At that time when I saw her, I had no idea that I was going to be going or Steve was going to be going. I mean, I didn't even know I was going to leave with Steve until the day that I left.
We have a problem. I've got to leave the area.
It came to a point where Steve just said, "I'm leaving town." And I'm going, "Wait a minute, you're going to leave and I'm going to stay here and face this entire thing by myself? What am I going to do? Everybody's going to come knocking on my door and say, 'Where's my money?' And I felt like I was going to get lynched."
Important thing is Deborah and I are leaving town. Now, are you going with us or not? Can you make
my
a decision?
choice was to stay here or go with him.
Are you with us? Are you
And
going or not?
I ended up by leaving with Steve and his family.
I'm going with you, Steve.
Okay. All right.
Definitely there was a premeditated decision on the part of Steve Cox and Eugene Richmond to fold up and leave town.
Let's quit beating around the bush.
They planned to leave for at least a month before they just didn't show up one morning.
Thanks for sticking around, you guys. I realize it's your weekend. I'll make it short.
On Friday, September the 21st, 1984, Eugene Richmond told his employees that he and Cox would be out of town on business through Monday.
As usual. We'll be back on Tuesday. So unless you've got any questions, see you Tuesday.
That weekend, according to Eugene Richmond, Stephen Cox cleaned out their office safe, taking over $200,000 in gold, silver, jewelry, and cash. Cox also took their financial records, which were stored on computer disks. He and his wife, Deborah, emptied their house and packed their belongings into a rented truck. Along with Eugene Richmond, they furtively departed Medford. Their final destination, Hawaii.
Stephen Cox, Deborah Cox, and Eugene Richmond dropped completely out of sight, and the people of Medford, Oregon had lost $3.5 million. But the story of the missing Medford millions was not over. The authorities learned that Stephen Cox might have disappeared from Medford because he feared for his life. 10 months after Stephen Cox, his wife, and Eugene Richmond vanished, leaving nothing but a bankrupt company that owed the people of Medford $3.5 million, the authorities had a surprise visitor.
Debbie, we appreciate you coming in for this interview today, and we'll try.
In July of 1985, Stephen Cox's wife, Deborah, returned to Medford, and through her attorney agreed to cooperate with the authorities.
What was your position with S.D. Cox Investments? She wasn't actually wanted as far as being a fugitive. We did want to talk to her, but there were no criminal charges pending. Then, within a week, Eugene Richmond also wanted to surrender himself, and so arrangements were made for him to surrender himself in the company of his attorney and to be interviewed and then to be processed on the fugitive warrants that were outstanding for him at the time. But for the most part, the information that we did glean from these interviews was really not helpful to us. How much money did you have to live on, and how much did you take with you?
Sergeant Sweeney, concerning that matter, we're not answering those questions today.
Do you accept any responsibility? Eugene Richmond wouldn't make any statements that could be used to incriminate him, and he couldn't really say anything about Stephen Cox without incriminating himself. As a result of that, we're still looking for S.D. Cox, or Stephen Cox.
One thing Richmond did tell the police was that in 1983, Cox had become involved with a mysterious investor.
Heyday on those rocks was fantastic. All right, I'm glad to hear that. You should be. I just want to remind you, Steve, that I'm not a man who likes to lose money.
There was an investor that invested hundreds of thousands of dollars with S.D. Cox Investments. And as security for his investment, he had taken out a life insurance policy on Stephen Cox.
Before Steve and I left town, okay, and I went to him and said, let's shut this thing down, bring in a judge, and just do a Chapter 11 and you know, just close it down, you know. Steve said, I can't. And it was because of this fella, because he owed him money, and Steve just felt like if he didn't pay this guy back, he would just hurt Steve or his wife or his kids or something.
Especially since we know of the threat, we know who the individual is, the individual would have to be a fool to come back and kill Stephen Cox because he didn't get his money back.
Eugene Richmond pled guilty to charges of racketeering and served 2 years in prison. Stephen Cox is still at large.
The message I'd like to send Stephen Cox is that he should come in, turn himself in, and face up to the people that he's really hurt.
Short of Steve Cox winning the lottery and coming back and paying back all of his investors, I don't foresee them ever being able to recoup any of their losses.
Steve Cox is the one who's in prison right now. He's the one who's doing time right now. And he will continue to do time until he turns around and faces the situation, until he lives up to his responsibilities. Because Steve, every day, has to wonder if somebody's going to walk in to where he's working, or if he's going to be at the market and somebody's going to see him. It's a small world.
Stephen Cox is 6 feet 2 inches tall, has blonde hair and blue eyes, and weighs over 200 pounds. He is now 38 years old, and he may be wearing a toupee as well as a beard or mustache. Update. Stephen Cox has been arrested in Lake Mead, Nevada, 25 miles southeast of Las Vegas. 5 days after he fled from Boise, Cox checked into the Lake Mead Lodge Motel. He registered under the name John Strauss and listed an Arizona address.
He was not the normal guest. He stayed in his room all day long. He would only leave at night. Very seldom did he leave in the daytime. And we noticed that the license plates were not the same as he had put down on his registration card. And that made us a little suspicious, but yet nothing we could put a finger on.
2 weeks later, Edna Reed made a startling discovery.
One day when I was out on the grounds, I saw the guest come out of his room. Instead of putting his trash in the bin in front of his room, he took it up to number 35, which was several doors away. And when I went to empty the trash out of that bin, I found the crumpled up letter. And like any curious female, I read the letter. When I read the letter, I saw the part that said something about the Unsolved Mystery Show being a bombshell. I showed the letter to my husband, Harold, and between the two of us, we decided it was time definitely to call the Rangers and tell them about the guest.
Lake Mead Park Rangers immediately ran a computer check and discovered that the car belonged to someone other than John Strauss.
On the morning of the 14th, we began to look for the person by going to the Lake Mead Lodge to see if we could identify, in fact, who he really was. When we got there, the vehicle was gone and the person was gone and had been gone for 15 or 20 minutes.
The next morning, park rangers spotted Cox's car and pulled him over in the parking lot of the Gold Strike Casino.
After we made the traffic stop, he produced identification, a driver's license issued to a Robert Davis. And we checked that name and date of birth through the NCIC computer and found that it was an alias used by one Stephen Cox and that there was a warrant for Mr. Cox. At that point, we placed him under arrest.
During a search of Cox's car, park rangers uncovered a small fortune.
When we looked in the passenger compartment of the vehicle and in the trunk, we found suitcases and other luggage-type bags filled with jewelry, rings, necklaces, collector-type baseball cards, some gold coins, silver coins. And I was really very curious to know why he had it in the vehicle and if, in fact, this was the stuff that he was wanted for taking in the first place.
Every parent's worst nightmare is the loss of a child to a violent stranger. Tonight, the Philadelphia Police Department needs your help in solving the brutal murder of a 4-year-old girl. We have with us Lieutenant Arthur Durant, investigating officer in the case. Lieutenant Durant, could you tell us a little something about Barbara Jean and her family?
Barbara Jean was 4.5 years old. She was the only child of Sharon and John Fay. She lived with her parents in the northeast section of Philadelphia, which is a relatively crime-free, middle-class section.
What are the circumstances of her murder?
On July 12, 1988, approximately 3 p.m. in the afternoon, while her mother was at work, Barbara Jean was out front of her house playing. Her father went to check on her and was unable to find her. He became frantic, started searching the area for her. He checked with the neighbors, he called police. The police came and they searched the area. Approximately 2 hours later, Barbara Jean was found, stuffed inside a cardboard box, approximately 2 blocks from her home. She'd been bludgeoned to death.
What clues do you have to the identity of the killer?
4 eyewitnesses observed the man at St. Vincent and Castor carrying a cardboard box. The man's been described as approximately 25 to 35 years old, white male, 5'8", 180 pounds, sandy brown hair with a little bit of blonde up front. At the time, he was wearing a white t-shirt, cut-off jeans, and he was carrying a cardboard box that previously had contained a 13-inch color Hitachi television set.
How can our audience help solve this tragic crime?
We feel there's somebody out there tonight that might have seen this male on January 12, 1988, or might know somebody that's engaged in this type of criminal activity that might have been in the Philadelphia area and fits this description.
For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone was watching. Perhaps it's you.